Greetings, everyone, and welcome. This is Dr. Lorre, and it's my good pleasure to be with you today as we talk about the synchronicity of healing and homeopathy. So let us get started. And you see there all of my contact information. Please reach out at any time. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about integrative nursing, what Haelan healing is. We'll touch on complex system science, synchronicity, and homeopathy, and then we'll have a complex case story and time for a conversation about synchronicities. Feel free to relax and enjoy this presentation. It's on my YouTube channel, and you can refer to it any time. So let's start with a little bit about me. I've been a healing arts practitioner for over 30 years, multiple modalities. A lot of that is energy work. I'm what they call a wildcat for life here in Tucson, Arizona, at the University of Arizona College of Nursing, where I earned my master's and my doctorate. I went on to do 2 integrative postdoc fellowships. So one is an integrative nurse faculty fellow, and the other as an integrative nurse coach. So that's what I did there. And for about a decade, I taught at the University of Arizona's College of Social and Behavioral Sciences. And then I transitioned over to the College of Nursing, teaching in the first integrative health focus Bachelor of Science program, and my clinical specialties and scholarship center on nurse traumatization burnout. I work with a lot of transition to practice and early career nurses. I'm also have various credentials in trauma healing. I do have a book coming up later this year, which is Nursing Your Healer's Heart, a recovery guide for nurse traumatization and burnout, and that will be complemented by a Haelan Academy, a healing academy and community where nurses can come together in a virtual safe space and to come together and do the healing that is before us. Also, I just spend a lot of time and just so enjoy giving presentations and talks around the world. So please feel free to reach out and I'll stop by and see where you are. So at this time, we usually just check in and see, let's, talk about today's topic is synchronicity as pertains to homeopathy, and just take a moment to reflect to see how comfortable you are with integrating homeopathy into your practice or into your life. At the end of this presentation, we'll have an opportunity to have a conversation. And for those of you watching remotely, you can comment in the chat if you like, or in the comment sections. But in life or in practice, what synchronicities have you experienced? And just to kind of cue that reflection process, let's define synchronicity as the occurrence of meaningful coincidences that have no discernible causal connection, or otherwise they're acausal. And just one more point to ponder and just kind of do a gentle self-exploration about how comfortable are you navigating the synchronicities that you encounter and experience in your life or in your practice. So now that we've gotten a little bit acquainted, let's take a moment to just use our five senses to ground and center. So you'll see at the top left, we're going to use our visual to tune into nature. You can close your eyes and bring up the nature scene of your choice. Then we will peak your sense of smell by using either citrus or any scent of your choice. Then we'll explore sound. I'm going to try and chime some Tibetan bells, and if those don't work, use any sound. Sometimes the microphone cuts them out. So if that happens, just any sound that is pleasant to you. I put a picture of a sound bowl because I really enjoy sound as a healing modality. Excuse me. Then we'll use the sense of touch, and you can put your hands over your heart, or you can do one hand over your heart, one hand over your belly in the Dantian region, or both hands over your Dantian. And then we'll use our virtual sense of taste, and you can imagine, or if you have any beverage or gum or mint handy, whatever you might have around, or just use your mind's eye to invoke this sense of taste. So go ahead and get comfortable in your chair. You can close your eyes or leave them open. You can turn your camera on or off, depending on how you want to experience this. So let's take a couple big rounds of breath. I'll count you in to the count of 4. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. One more round. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. So now we're going to go into using your sense of smell to help ground, center, and enter, so we can join in the present moment together. So pick citrus if you enjoy citrus, or any other scent that just makes you feel wonderful. So just inhale to the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Just feel. 2, 3. Exhale. 2, 3. Inhale your favorite scent. Inhale, 2, 3. Hold, 2, 3. Feel it as you exhale, 2, 3. Next, we're going to just awaken our sense of sound. I have Tibetan bells with me, so I'm going to clang them now. If you don't hear them on the recording, just insert your favorite sound through your mind's eye. Here we go, Tibetan bells. Again, for the sound, Tibetan bells here. And third time for the sound. Just take a moment to notice, to just notice and observe what is happening in your body, any sensations or perceptions. Notice if you're feeling a little more calm, a little more regulated, a little more grounded, a little more centered. As you place one or both hands over your heart, or your dantian, your belly, and just feel the sense of touch and the healing energy that is coming through you to you in light and love. Just feel that for the count of 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Just notice how your 5 senses are connecting you internally, connecting to yourself and the world around you. And lastly, in your mind's eye, or if, like me, you have a sip of something, let's go ahead and use your sense of taste. If you don't have anything handy, just imagine a favorite beverage or a favorite bite of your favorite food, and just either physically or using your mind's eye, taste that now. One, 2, 3, and another taste. Just notice, just observe whatever is happening within you. And we'll take one more deep cleansing breath. Inhale to 3, and we'll exhale to 3. Here we go. Big inhale, 2, 3, and slow exhale, 2, 3. Beautifully done. When you're ready, you can just Wiggle in your chair, open your eyes, and come back to the presentation. You can use this practice anytime, and you can do it in literally 2 or 3 seconds for each of these. So it's a great, what I call a microdoses matters practice to ground and center anywhere, anytime. So let's talk about our first topic, which is integrative nursing. So nurse scholars, Mary Jo Kreitzer pictured at the top, and Dr. Mary Coython in the lower right, define integrative nursing is really nursing, and it's a way of being, knowing, and doing that advances a whole health perspective to optimize well-being. Integrative nurses use evidence-informed strategies, including homeopathy, to support whole person, system, and planetary healing. So this talk is grounded in the integrative nursing paradigm. In that paradigm, it looks at the human as body, mind, spirit. And in my work, I've expanded that term to be body, mind, essence. So we can fully encompass, it's a whole health term that I've introduced in my book, to encompass the totality of a person's unique and ever-changing lived experiences and synchronicities. So body includes the physical, but could also include the energetic, the etheric, the astral, and other bodies to which we live and inhabit or are connected to. In our mind, that includes all levels of consciousness, mind states, and emotions, the whole spectrum of all that is and can ever be. And then the essence is really, not only is it the spiritual realm, but it also includes the legacies of abuses or the systemic oppressions that any person carries or embodies through their DNA or neural circuits or bodily systems. So even though I showed them in 3 parts, really body, mind, essence is the totality of the human experience across all domains. And that's a lot. It's a lot to really think about. But yet here we are looking at whole person health. And so I'm going to encourage you to, embrace the body, mind, essence perspective, at least for this talk, because it's going to help you really see how homeopathy and synchronicity work together to facilitate healing. So to frame that, we're going to look at the integrative nursing principles that guide practice. And on this next slide here, I put the green check marks are the ones that are most relevant to today's talk. So today we're going to talk about whole system health, people, you, me, all of us. We are whole humans with contexts and systems within which we live and work, and we are inseparable from those systems and contexts, and we are influenced by them. Also within each of us is our innate capacity for healing, and we're going to talk a lot about that coming up. The third integrative principle, all of these apply, but my talk is focused on the green check marks, is that nursing care is person-centered and relationship-centered, which means that we facilitate healing, but importantly, when we start looking at relational neuroscience, it's so important that no one heals in a vacuum. We co-heal and co-regulate with one another. Number 4 is that we leverage the healing and restorative properties of nature, and certainly homeopathy is right in there. Also, integrative nursing practice is informed by evidence. So we use evidence and we assess the patient's situation and the systems in which they're in, and then we apply interventions and therapeutics from least to most invasive or aggressive, depending upon their need and context. And of course, the 6th integrative principle has to do with nurse and caregiver well-being. So we prioritize that along with the care that we provide. So let's take a look at that integrative nursing principle number 1. We as human beings are whole systems. We're inseparable from and influenced by our environments and our contexts. So what might that look like? So if we look to the work of Dr. Engel from, I think it was in the 1970s, and I've kind of expanded upon this. We are the interconnected and Unitarian nature of reality. So if we start in the upper left, the smallest energy particle is a quark, and those can collect into atoms and molecules and cells and tissues and organs and a whole nervous system, which is 300 to 500 million years old from an evolutionary perspective in humans. And then we have these organs and tissues and cells that also organize into different bodily systems. And each of us are a whole person, inseparable from our context. And then we can gather and connect as dyads, triads, families, groups, communities, going down to the bottom, cultures and subcultures, society and nations. And this represents the tapestry of the environments and contexts in which we live, which are connected to the biosphere, the universe, and indeed the metaverse, which is where we get into where energy and matter have different physical properties. And so you can see in this image that it could be atoms and molecules and cells. It could also be bodily systems in the background with the body. The background could also represent the community or group in which persons live. It could represent all of these dimensions around this slide. And so even though we're looking at maybe something that's inside that bubble and the interconnected within whatever topic we're discussing, it's also connected very energetically and through other ways to the context around. So this is kind of a big idea, and it's really hard to conceptualize for some people. And so just kind of allow your mind just to, explore the possibility of this. And we'll come back to this slide in a little bit later. So you, like many of the people that I work with, might be wondering, well, how do I then, as a nurse, really, like we're over here, how am I facilitating healing in a system and multi-system, complex system such as this? And that's a great question. So if you have any follow-up questions to that, please put them in the chat, or you can put them in the comments and we can discuss those further. But let's take a look at how healing works. And I'm going to use Haelan healing, as has been brought forth by my mentor and nurse scholar, Dr. Janet Quinn, for whom I am so grateful. And also, one of the most profound synchronicities of my life was this encounter that I just had the presence of mind to get a selfie for. And so at the end of this presentation, if there's time, I'll share that with you. So according to Dr. Quinn, her work is centered on Hal, which is the Old English word for heal, which Hal means to make sound or whole. And so if we think about that and we look at, okay, well, if that's Hal, then what is the process of becoming Hal or whole? And that would be Haelan in Old English terms in the second clipboard there. So then back to the question of how do we facilitate healing in such a complex system from quarks all the way to a metaverse, right? And everything in between. Well, Dr. Quinn suggests that we do this by positioning one or more aspect of a person's essence, body-mind essence, in right relationship for healing. And that's done through some repatterning. And so when we think of healing, I always like to put it as Haelan healing, to really keep in focus. It's about positioning ourselves, if we're working on our own healing with others, or our patients or our clients, in right relationship for healing. And let's take a look at what that means in the sense of body-mind essence. So according to Dr. Quinn, when we position ourselves or those in our care in right relationship for healing, we affect a shift or a repatterning in one or more aspect of that person's body, mind, essence. So again, that can be generational or healing, that can be systemic healing, that can be physical or emotional or mental healing. So any one or more of those aspects, we create a shift, and that results in a repatterning in that person, because we are inseparable from and influenced by those contexts and systems. So Haelan healing is really a process of moving towards wholeness within and without. And so drawing upon the work of Dr. Bonnie Badenoch, another one of my mentors, and she's an expert in transpersonal neurobiology and relational neuroscience. She says that life is really a dynamic and iterative process of rupture and repair. And her work is centered on interpersonal relationships. And all of this, whether it's in relationships or any other dimension of life, is in service. These ruptures and the repairs are in service to our growth and indeed our resilience. So as individuals and as collectives, whether dyad, triad, community, societies, etc., in our body, mind, essence, in the grandest context of the word, we are always striving for homeostasis. We are always moving towards healing and wholeness. So that kind of brings us to the current state, where we have imbalanced and perhaps misaligned healing traditions in traditional healthcare systems, particularly here in the US. And so let's just kind of look at the evolution of the healing traditions long before we had the Hippocratic tradition, which is the one that most of us are familiar with, that emphasizes external intervention and looks at, causal effects, fixing fixing or healing things kind of like in a kind of a body parts manner, like kind of a mechanistic approach even. And so that is really the Hippocratic tradition is a big driver of our contemporary health systems. But before that, and long before that, there was the Asclepian tradition. And the Asclepian tradition really emphasizes healing from within, and was looking at what we would now call non-local or non-linear acausal healing, because there weren't, going back to early Greek times, there weren't a lot of interventions that could be done. And so there's not a right or a wrong. Both are so important, but it's imbalanced right now and hasn't been imbalanced for a long time. So again, we'll just take a moment to pause, and you can note any questions that you might have. And I will proceed then to the next slide. And our next topic, which is complex system science, which I've hopefully broken down for you in a very user-friendly manner. So here's sort of the image that I've selected to represent the totality of the lived experience and the human in their context and their systems, including bodily systems and beyond. And we look at nurse theorist Martha Rogers, who described what I'm talking about as pan-dimensionality. And that really means all dimensions of reality. And then when we start looking at complex systems science, which Rogers and other nurse scholars were really interested in, and even perhaps before it was even a formal science, but they were exploring that. And so what we know we're going to talk about a lot today with the green check mark is what you're seeing represented in the right is what complex system science calls a complex adaptive system. It's always changing, always self-organizing. And this is really important for how we consider how synchronicity and homeopathy are connected to all of that. So when we're looking at complex systems, they're open systems and energy fields, and they are unitary in oneness, if you will, with all the integral energy fields to which they are connected. And I love quantum physics. I would have studied quantum physics more, but my math proficiencies sort of tapped out at a particular level, and the rest was just kind of beyond what I was able to learn at that chapter in my life. But I just have such passion for it. And so we look at then where healing is concerned, really looking at there's linear features of reality, and there's also non-local features of reality. So that's where we're going to be looking in sort of these really seemingly abstract. On the surface, these are very seemingly abstract concepts, but when you start digging into the science of them, there's a lot of support that they're not as abstract as perhaps we might think. All right, so I want to just take a moment, kind of walk us through, and this is again Newman, I'm sorry, not Newman, this is Janet Quinn's work on healing, and taking a look at what has happened over time regarding how we as nurses and physicians and healers have looked at, historically speaking, healing perspectives. So initially it was, and I'm talking in contemporary times, taking this sort of with the mechanical revolution, right? Late 1800s and beyond, kind of this systems approach. Like we can break down a human health like we could make a machine, and the body is separate from the mind, is separate from the spirit. And if we just get in there with the right tools, we can fix things. And when we fix things, people get healthy. So for those theory geeks out there, this would be consistent with Dossie's Era 1 medicine, or nursing theorist Newman's particularistic deterministic paradigm. Then came this sort of quasi-local system approach, where it's like, well, body, mind, and spirit are kind of they're connected. We can't just like separate them. They work together. And so we need to take kind of a more, biopsychosocial approach kind of came in. And this would be consistent with Dossi Era 2 medicine and Newman's interactive integrative paradigm. And now where we are going, I think we're somewhere between the middle and the last one here, is really understanding the human lived experience, and through this body mind essence. Like there's so much more to us than just body mind spirit even, right? And the interconnectedness through our systems and contexts, and really valuing that we also have there's local and non-local approaches to healing. There's linear and non-linear approaches to healing. There are closed systems and open systems, and we can't really reduce the human just to body, mind, spirit. Indeed, we need to look at body, mind, essence. And this would be very consistent with Dossi Era 3 and Newman's unitary transformative. Get this lined up. Lost my mouse there for a minute. Pardon me. So you might be asking, how in the heck? Why does this apply to nursing? And as it turns out, there's very strong application of all that you've heard about regarding complex adaptive systems and nursing tenets. So as it turns out, complex adaptive systems are whole systems that change over time. They have a global, holistic, non-linear, non-local order, which means we can't just drop a pin in it. That's so much more complex than just being able to, in an empiric realm, be able to, pinpoint causality. We can't pinpoint exactly how all modalities of healing help people repattern and reposition in body, mind, essence. Number 4, complex adaptive systems are not predictable by the sum of the properties of their parts. And this is really moving us into that era 3, or into that non-local type of healing. So when we're talking about nursing, looking at complex adaptive systems, and particularly synchronicity and homeopathy, change is often synergistic. It can be exponential. This is one of the things that, in homeopathy, you give a teeny, teeny, tiny little dose and you get these huge exponential healing gains. Our systems are self-organizing and are always changing and occurring at individual and collective levels. So as it turns out, complex adaptive systems and nursings are very much aligned. So you might be going, okay, that was a lot. And I would agree with you, that might be a lot. So what's the take-home message? Please get me someplace where I can land on and understand how all this makes sense. And the take-home message is this: where complex adaptive systems are concerned, and nursing, particularly integrative and homeopathic applications that involve synergy and synchronicity, non-local, non-linear, and acausal healing matters just as much as local, linear, and causal healing matters. They're balanced. We need both. And so just to kind of untangle some terms you may have heard, synergy is the behavior of a system that cannot be predicted by the properties of its parts. That's synergy. Synchronicity is similar, but different, meaningful coincidences that have no discernible causal connection. Things are happening, we can see the results, but we don't see the causal mechanisms. And why? Because not everything has a causal mechanism in the sort of an empirical reductionistic paradigm. So as nurses, we do this all the time through our care and interventions and our therapeutic presence. We introduce change into that complex adaptive system. We can do this through energy work, all sorts of healing and therapeutic modalities, certainly through homeopathy, through traditional nursing, medical, pharmaceutical interventions, or through transpersonal healing. This comes into Watson's transpersonal caring moment and Badenoch's relationship is everything. So no matter how we go about positioning those in our care in right relationship for healing, we are facilitating repatterning in one or more dimension of their body, mind, essence. And this leads to Haelan healing and supports the patient or our client in moving towards homeostasis and wholeness, which is the organism's goal at the highest level, is to be healthy and well and survive. But that's a whole nother topic for another day. So this is the how of how we go about positioning ourselves and others in right relationship for healing by that repatterning in one or more dimension of body, mind, essence. And so that gives us just a whole huge toolkit and approach to facilitating healing, which just warms my healer's heart. Oh, I'm not sure. I think I went the wrong way there. Pardon me for that misclick. So really, from my perspective in my work, and it's not just me, it's many integrative practitioners and scholars, is we need to become really more balanced and aligned in our approaches to healing, where we certainly external interventions that have local and causal effects, absolutely. Those are so needed, especially when it comes to hyperacute and acute care. When we get over into the world of chronic conditions, which is sort of where my interest lies, oftentimes many complex chronic conditions cannot fully be addressed by local causal healing. We need to really take a look at the complex adaptive system and work both within and without it, and leverage also the non-local, non-linear, acausal approaches to that repatterning in body-mind essence to facilitate healing. So that might have been a lot. And maybe it wasn't, but I would love to hear your questions. Now, finally, some of you might be wondering, when are we going to get to homeopathy? And how does this synchronicity work? And what does it mean to me in my clinical practice? So let's unpack that a little bit in this section. We'll turn to the work to Almirientis, I hope I'm saying that correctly, who really talked about synchronicity and how that works in causal and acausal, local and non-local, as a connecting principle. So not always is a connection compatible with the biomolecular mechanistic explanation of healing. So the physiological effects of crude substances are often similar to the symptoms of illness cured by the corresponding homeopathic remedy. And of course, this is the similar principle. All right, so in this paper, looking at synchronicity as a connecting principle, and that just made so much sense to me. It's sort of the linchpin between causal and acausal, local and non-local healing, and it just kind of brings it's the missing link. So again, going back to just this slide that we've seen before, we just can't assume in the top two that we can that just healing occurs by taking a mechanistic approach or by taking a partial holistic approach, a quasi-local system approach. In fact, we need to consider the complex adaptive system in all that it is down here at the bottom. And so let's take a look at the work of Dr. Iris Bell, who is my colleague here at the University of Arizona. I did not know that until I read her work. So that was a lovely synchronicity that I just experienced. And looking at homeopathy, and again, looking at it as this type of complex adaptive system healing. And in her work, she says that the body networks can use indigenous cell-to-cell signaling and amplify the small magnitude signal information. All right, so that would be local, but the results are disproportionately large. That is nonlinear adaptive modifications across the interconnected, self-organized biological networks and subnetworks of the body. This is complex adaptive symptom amplification for mechanisms of healing. And so here we are looking at homeopathy, and yes, there's a local response, and then there's so much more. It's both. And this includes that connecting synchronicity. Yes, we start with maybe an intended local target, but there's far more to it than that. In the second part of her study, she goes on to talk about the low doses of these complex medicines acting as biological signaling agents to initiate hormesis via a network-wide pattern of adaptive responses by the recipient complex adaptive system rather than as conventional pharmaceutical drugs. And this is huge. This is so consistent with the work of Janet Quinn and Badenoch and with Newman and Dossi that we have talked about. And so again, this whole local and non-local healing that is occurring, which that should be reflected right there. There should be local and non-local. So I will fix the slide, and my apologies for not catching that until right now. So how do we harmonize all of this as nurses, as integrative nurses who work with homeopathic interventions, is really to understand that it's a big Venn diagram. and that in the middle of that, both integrative and traditional approaches of support, healing, wholeness, and homeostasis. But those aren't always readily available, and it's very frustrating to clinicians, and it's very frustrating to me as a nurse scientist and scholar that this harmonization process and us really being able to leverage all the healing approaches that are available to us, that there are barriers, and the biggest barriers are money and publication and funding bias. There's not a lot of money to be made in therapeutic touch. There's not big pharma type of money to be made in homeopathic remedies, and the list goes on and on. Acupuncture, I don't know if you've seen the film. It was out a while ago. Don Berwick, who was the founder of the IHI, Institute for Healthcare Improvement, put out an escape fire video. It's worth watching, and highlights really how difficult the Veterans Administration, huge healthcare system, and they know acupuncture works for postoperative pain, among other things. They know it works, and they really go through and highlight how the challenges, the system barriers, because of all the financial interest to get acupuncture as one of many integrative healing approaches into the healthcare system. So something you might want to look at. Oops, I think I clicked the wrong way again. So this would be a pause for just any reflection or any questions that are coming to the mind, and just honoring those. So let's just briefly talk about complex case studies, and then we'll have a conversation and a Q&A. So in my work, my work is centered in trauma healing, specifically nurse-specific traumatization, secondary to healthcare system inadequacies. That's my wheelhouse. Connected to my wheelhouse, though, as an example of non-local healing and synchronicity, are what we're doing here across the world, really tribal health and wellness through land-based healing and ancestral healing and psychotherapy. So these are nonlinear, acausal approaches to healing that are having tremendous repatterning and healing impact. Let's take a quick look at a case study, kind of a general case study. The patient population that I'm affiliated with, second to traumatized nurses, would be patients who are experiencing environmentally acquired illnesses such as mold or mycotoxin illness, Lyme, heavy metal, mast cell activation, chemical intolerance, multiple chemical sensitivities, all of which can result in central sensitization syndrome, which means that these people are so, their systems are so, have been overstressed that they cannot really tolerate any interventions, very few. These are systems that are in overdrive. And so I'm a small player, and a good number of my colleagues started a nonprofit organization here called the International Society for Environmentally Acquired Illness. And I just put this up here as it's a nonprofit. I don't get anything from this, but there are many people, millions of people who are affected by environmentally acquired illness, and that number keeps going up. And I just wanted to bring this forth as a resource should you need it. We have an amazing repository of evidence, and there's tremendous interprofessional collaboration on managing some of these complex cases, such as this woman who, through the course of her illness, she cannot tolerate medications, or, I mean, not any medications, but we can't introduce. These systems are so fragile right now that we cannot really introduce much change to them at all, because the tiniest amount of change overwhelms the system, especially those who have, these chemical sensitivities or mast cell activation. It's the immune system is just on. It's stuck in hyper alert with a nuclear response to anything, any physical particle that comes into the body. And it's really challenging. Of course, I got involved with all this because I am one of those patients, and I'm doing very, very well. But these patients have a very difficult time, and medications, supplements, herbals, tinctures, homeopathic remedies are not available to their system in a traditional, I'm going to ingest something and there is going to be a local effect that is going to repattern internally to affect in a relatively causal and localized manner healing. Not available to this patient population. Not widely available. It is available, but boy, it is a low and slow, and it's a long healing arc. So how can we help them? And as it turns out, we go back to these integrative nursing principles, and we're looking at them as a whole system, the whole system. We have a complex adaptive system. We can go acausal, we can go nonlinear. We can leverage their innate capacity for heal by using nature, which includes energy, energy fields that are brought forth by nature. And we can use evidence and evidence-formed interventions. And sure enough, at least what one local provider is doing, and I'm sure there are others. I couldn't find any published studies, but I'm sure they're coming because Dr. Bell just published here in the last year or two. So I'm sure this is being looked at. It's just not in the evidence base just yet, is taking this more Asclepian. Let's look at healing from within using non-local, non-linear, and acausal mechanisms. And so what we do for these patients in terms of where homeopathic remedies and even herbals and tinctures is that we can put the remedy in a little paper envelope, as you see there, and they can safety pin that to their clothing, and they can tuck it under their pillow at night, and or a teeny tiny little vial of a tincture or an herbal remedy. And so you might say, oh, please, you're telling me that you can just put this next to their body and they're going to get some effect. And the answer is yes. And why is that? Because we are introducing new energy into the system through the substance. It doesn't have to be ingested necessarily. It doesn't necessarily, I mean, for those who can ingest, that's fine. Of course, that would be a preferred mechanism, right? That you would get faster results, but that's not available to every patient, especially in this patient population. And so patient testimonials and case studies suggest, and further studies are needed, that in fact, this is one way that we can help position our patients in the right relationship to repattern in one or more dimension of their body, mind, essence, using a complex systems integrative nursing approach. So kind of the take-home message is, if you're planning care and you want to really kind of lean into the lens of integrative nursing and complex adaptive system science approaches to healing, and that is inclusive, that is as holistic as can be. Holistic with WHOLISTIC, holistic, using local and non-local, causal and acausal, Hippocratic and Asclepian approaches to healing. There's three things to consider. The first one is to consider the timing of the intervention. Timing is everything, and we know this as nurses. We assess for readiness. And so the second thing to consider is the system's readiness for the intervention. And the system isn't necessarily limited to the patient's body or mind systems, but it includes the patient and their relationships and the systems and the context in which they live. As you know, I've worked in hospice. My daughter is a hospice nurse, and a lot of times the family system, for example, is not ready to let go of curative and focus on the palliative care. That might be an example of how we can, position the family and the patient and in right relationship for them to approach the end of life transition with ease and grace. But not everybody, as you know, arrives at the same place at the same time, and not every aspect of the patient's system to which and context is available at the same time. So we have to really not only look at the patient's readiness, but the readiness of the system in which they live in and love. And then lastly, consider how the system uses the intervention and its inherent healing trajectory. And indeed, that's what was done here. Here it's like this patient is benefiting from a homeopathic remedy, but it's not available to them orally. And really considering how else can that system, the body system and all the other systems that are interconnected, use that homeopathic remedy to invoke the inherent healing trajectory. So it's just so lovely. It's just so lovely that we have so many ways in which we can facilitate healing. So that is kind of the last of the big topics. And at this time, we're going to come back to any questions you have and have a conversation about what synchronicities you've experienced in practice and in life. And if there's time, I will certainly share mine. So let's chat. And at the end of this presentation, of course, you'll find my references, and that's a partial reference list. I can send you a QR code with that has hundreds of references, but I didn't want to overwhelm you. So let's just take a moment and ponder these questions. Until next time, it is just my tremendous privilege to have spent this time with you and to facilitate healing in your life and that of your patients. Until next time, namaste.